Hello, everybody, and welcome to Hash Rate. My name is Mark Jeffrey. My guests today are Michaela and Pedro of Nova Subnet 68, which is currently clocking in at number 17 on the 75 Subnet chart with a market cap of 1.3 million as of this morning. So, hello, Michaela and Pedro. How are you guys doing?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having us.
So I've been sort of, like everyone, I've been playing the subnet game, looking at all the subnets, studying what's going on. And it's, up until the dTAO launch, I knew what some of the subnets were, but I was nowhere near as deep in the weeds as I am right now, trying to figure out what's going on. So it's definitely, served its purpose in forcing people like me to look a lot harder. And I was familiar with protein folding subnet number 25. In fact, we just had him on the show like a week ago. And so I knew some people were doing some things with bio stuff. But tell me about Nova. Tell me what you guys are doing and give us an understanding what you're up to.
Yeah, of course. So Pedro and I started a drug discovery company last year, and we were really interested in really leveraging AI to expedite that process and really increase the efficiency with which we selected molecules to synthesize and advance in the R&D. I'm a longtime supporter and believer of Bittensor. And I think particularly with dTAO and that making it more feasible to launch new subnets, we were very excited to mix the two things. So in our case, we're still a biotech company, and we're very interested in drug discovery R&D and the opportunity to leverage this global community of miners to select molecules to move forward with. So the way that it works is we're starting off by having these rotating challenges where every hour there's a specific target, and miners need to find the best molecule with the highest affinity in the shortest amount of time. Our intention is to build upon that and have other key properties that are actually important when thinking about drug development and that increase the likelihood that a drug will be efficacious and safe. But just for starters, we started with one target, and we've got plans to build up from there. So we'll be applying some of our expert knowledge to then go through all the miner submissions and select which ones are of most interest to move forward with.
Pedro, did you have something to add to that? You look like you might want to say something.
Yeah, no, I think it pretty much covered everything. But the core idea here is that we are decentralizing the process of doing inference over which compounds hold a high potential of binding and having the effect that you want over specific protein targets, and decentralizing this in a way that we align that the best innovative search approaches are going to be the winners in terms of finding the best molecules.
So this is sort of like SETI at home, it sounds like to me. I don't know if you remember that. You might not be old enough. Back when I was a youngin', SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Life, something or other. It was basically like all the space telescopes, right? They're all pointed up at the heavens, and they were amassing a giant pile of data, but the SETI project did not have the computing power to actually sort through all the data that they had collected, looking for alien signals, right? So they said, okay, all you people out there with computers, if you want to participate and help us sift through this data, set up the screensaver, and while the screensaver is rolling on your computer, it's searching through a little chunk of the data that we will give you, and you will hunt for extraterrestrial life, and maybe one of you guys out there will find it, right? So your computer at home might be the one that finds the signal, right? So this really reminds me a lot of that, right? And obviously it's not home computers. People are, you need beefier machines. So it's people with colo facilities running AI models as opposed to sort of a screensaver. So, the scale is definitely different, but same general idea. But I have a question about sort of how this works. Now, it's been a while since my salad days where I was a computer science major at the University of New Hampshire a long, long time ago. But we studied analysis of algorithms, and it sounds to me like this sort of hunt for the molecule is the traveling salesman problem, where you're just basically trying lots of different combinations of putting the Tinker toys together. And I might be wrong, but that's my guess as to what's going on here. and the LLM models, like how does AI specifically help sort of just try all the combinations on the safe?
So first of all, I think like it could be, compared with the salesman problem, but it's not exactly the same. So currently we have a new concept and a new thing in the drug development that is called chemical spaces. Okay, so what a chemical space is a space usually containing like billions of potentially synthesizable molecules that you have a high confidence that you very likely will be able to synthesize molecules from this subset of like the full chemical space that we could imagine, that we're talking here about like a huge number. In our case, we're going with a chemical space that is like a little larger than 1 billion molecules. Most of them were never synthesized, but they have like a high likelihood of success of being synthesized. The thing here is that it has become standard for companies to go for machine learning models or many kinds of predictions over molecules to know, okay, do I have like a high likelihood that this molecule will be binding and doing what we want it to do over the right target, and not binding ideally to the proteins that could be off target and involved with like side effects. The problem is that doing the predictions over these huge chemical spaces, it would be like absolutely expensive, and it would take a really long time. So we're turning this into
Sorry, I
a
just want to
problem.
clarify. It would be very expensive to do it in real life, and that's
Exactly.
so we don't want to do it in real life. We want to do it in computers. So I just want to make sure that's clear. If I understand what you're saying,
Even in computer, when we're talking about, for example, there are many kinds of models that can like be used to predict with a good level of confidence if a molecule is or is not going to be binding and having an effect over specific proteins. But even just running the predictions over billions of molecules would be super expensive. So we're turning the problem into a search problem in which we're like incentivizing heuristic searches, active learning approaches. So it is like you can use machine learning approaches here to help you prioritize the molecules from the chemical space that we really want to do the predictions. You can use like smart and clever search approaches. There are many ways to go about that. But this is how we're turning the problem into something that is much more accessible for people even without, the medicinal chemistry expertise, but people that like with, mathematical expertise, and people that do have like a good software development expertise. They could be joining to help us find the molecules with the highest potential of becoming new therapeutics.
okay. So it sounds like you're trying to reduce the search space or better predict where the molecules are likely to be. You're not actually trying the combinations on the safe. You're basically saying, let's smartly, using AI, reduce the search space, which we will then try to this, instead of something that is just as large as all the molecules in the galaxy,
Right.
or something stupid like that, right?
Both.
So, okay.
So it'd be basically impossible, incredibly expensive to just go through and like synthesize all of them and run all of the in vitro assays. It's still also really expensive to do that with a computer, and very time intensive if you're just going to brute force the project, the database. But we are using a model that was released last year that's like actually fairly reliable, or it's considered a state-of-the-art model in predicting what are going to be the molecules' interactions and its target activity. And then from that, we're asking our miners to find which one makes the most sense. So it's all about, like in pharma industry, they always talk about the funnel, both as the problem and as the solution. So you're just constantly trying to shortlist as much as possible, because the further you go in the development process, the more and more expensive each step becomes. So the more that we can optimize for shortlisting now, the faster and less expensive our process will be thereafter.
Got it. Okay. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. So, okay, so let's talk about you find a molecule. Let's just say you do, right? And that's the goal, right? Like somebody needs to win the Hunger Games, right? So you have someone who finally wins and you're like, oh, this looks really good. Now you go into, I assume you try to patent it, and then you try to get it out into the market or sell the patent to somebody else. Is that correct, A? And then B, how does the subnet benefit from that, or do they not? How do those two things relate or not?
I think there's details that we're currently ironing out and that we're getting expert advice on. But at a high level, our intention is to guarantee that the value that the entire community is creating by either mining, validating, or staking will be reflected in that. And so we're exploring how we can tokenize those assets. And the reality is too, is like we're generating we're generating giant libraries, and like our specific interest lies within like a certain like theme area. But the reality is like we can also become like the entry point for other companies to be exploring other therapeutics in disease areas that aren't necessarily of our interest. And that's, I think, where tokenization is like a really great invention that everybody can like gain like fractional ownership over the IP that is going to be developed. There's certain questions around the specifics of that. But at a high level, we're working very hard to guarantee that value loops back to the original like contributors of this process.
Got it. So still figuring it out. And do the miners, I guess, are participating in the discovery process. Is there some chance that they may, one of them may wake up and be like, hey, my computer is the one who figured this out, so I'm the one who should own this patent, or, you see what I'm saying? Like, is there some danger of that, do you think? And have you thought that through? How does that work?
Yeah, so this is actually a very interesting question. But considering how usually the patent's evaluation happen in order for a patent to be accepted and granted, just in silico data is not going to be enough. So you need to also go there, have the compound synthesized, and then have it tested at least for like some in vitro validations, so you can really claim what you usually claim in patents like that. So how to say is not standard for just in silico data to be enough for you to be able to like be granted a patent. So there are more steps that you need to do after you have your potential candidates.
Yes. Well, I guess I would be like a service provider. So I mean, like regular labs, they farm stuff out all the time, right? Sub jobs, and there's no issue there. So my guess is that's probably sort of legally the same thing. But I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but that would be my guess.
Well, there's also like 2 follow-up steps that do require a little bit of expertise. And one of them is understanding what is like the therapeutic value of the outputs. And then the other one is also is more on the business side, and being like, if the end goal is to like have some sort of licensing deal with a pharmaceutical company, like they have a set of metrics that they use to evaluate whether or not something is worth developing further, right? So then is this going to be actually like attractive? And there's a whole like thesis there around like what's the right kind of target validation. The problem has been historically that biotech investors and pharmaceutical companies have played that way too safe. And that's why we're seeing that most drugs are recycling 90% of the chemical scaffolds of previous drugs that have been approved, or there's just like there's a culture of patent busting. So what this model does, and like being able to do this in like an incentive based mechanism, is that it allows us to like really push novelty and pursue things that maybe wouldn't have been funded from an early stage, given the fact that we are like emitting our own token and being able to like reward people from the start. It really, I think, presents the opportunity to solve what they call like the valley of death. So you have a bunch of molecules, a bunch of like potential leads that don't get funding at this early stage because it's too speculative. So the ongoing liquidity that we can access through Bittensor allows us to actually explore other kinds of disease areas that have been neglected by the pharma industry thus far.
Wow, that is super fast. I was going to ask you, like, why are you doing things on Bittensor? And, why do you like this, right? Like, because it would seem to me, and talking, I have friends both in crypto and not crypto. And some of my not crypto friends really they just hate crypto. And they look at Bittensor and TAO and they're like, that's just bullshit. It's a meme coin for AI and you're just making money off of, the AI meme. It's like Doge, but Doge is probably a bad example, or loaded example, I should say. Probably another meme coin. I don't know, dog with hat, but for AI, right? And I'm like, no. It's a very useful thing, but they're always like, why don't these people just f the token, f the network, just raise some money from a VC, set up an AWS instance and run the models there, and don't mess with the tokens at all. And your answer to this is super fascinating. You're like, you could not raise the money from the VCs because they'd just be like, this is too speculative, this is too weird and edge casey. And Bittensor gives you effectively the same thing that a raise would give you. It gives you computation. It gives you people working on this model and funding, frankly. It's sort of subsidized by the emissions from the TAO blockchain itself. The TAO blockchain itself is sort of the VC in many ways that allows all this kind of wild experimentation. And the subnet, token holders are the ones who are like, no, we like these guys. I'm going to buy their token because I think they're doing great work. Which, by the way, just full disclosure, I have bought your token, so I'm in the boat.
Oh, awesome!
So I like what you're doing. Yeah. Well, I like the fact that it's like useful. Yeah, go ahead, Michaela.
Yeah, I was going to say, essentially, it really empowers us to go for like the high risk, high reward, right? And also, we're processing so many of them that in and of itself hedges the bet as well. What you would hear from a traditional VC in the biotech space is like, come back to me once you have like clinical trial data. But it's like, how do we get there? Who's funding? Yeah. Who's funding the in between, right? And I think this is where like crypto presents like a new use case that I think is particularly suited to solve for this problem.
Wow, that is, I love to hear this because this is great because this means that all kinds of new things are going to be tried that just wouldn't have been tried any other way. So how many validators and miners are currently sort of rolling around in your subnet? You guys know?
So we now are actually all slots are taken. So all 200 and 66 and 56 slots are taken, and we have 5 very active validators. Really, doing.
So 256 miners. So people, people basically trying things. So little worker bees trying to find molecules. And then you have like the 6 or so validators who are super busy, who are like checking the work and being like, oh. Yes. Yeah.
Exactly. So it should be around 250 miners and around 6 very, very active validators that are really, working there, running our code and evaluating which miners have really been able to submit the best molecules for the specified target of each one of the challenges.
And how do you feel about that process? Because I've heard sort of, there's been complaints that some of the validators and some of the miners collude, right, to sort of, turn in bullshit. They're like, no, look, I mined something. Well, yes, it looked like you did. I give you the rewards, right? Like, so there's that sort of, and it's bullshit because it's 2 hands belonging to the same guy. Have you guys encountered that? How do you fight that?
So one important thing here is that we implemented a winner-takes-all mechanism for every challenge, which means there is not a lot of space for that. The validators must agree on the winner, and that is it. It's like the miner that submitted the molecule with the highest predicted binding affinity. So we're really like tackling this kind of problem by going this path, in which we need to have full consensus here in terms of who is presenting the molecule.
Yeah, so the consensus busts up the cartels that are trying to cheat the system. You have to, bottom line. So it's, if you have basically, assuming that the validators are largely honest, which I think that is true. I think most of them are honest. Then the collusion cannot really take place once this thing is up and running at scale. Which okay, I buy that actually. So okay, so tell me a little bit about how you guys came to do this company and this project. What are your backgrounds? What were you kind of doing before this, and that sort of led you in this direction?
Honestly, a lot of passion and interest. I was formerly doing strategy. I was a strategy partner at Google, and I honestly just found myself spending more and more time doing science research, and realized that I needed to get into the drug discovery field, and that I found that really fascinating. So I went into a wild goose chase to find a technical co-founder, and was connected with Pedro actually through the dTAO circles, and we were talking about kind of how there was this growing need and gap in terms of what we're calling metaprogramming drugs, and that really you have a disease-centric model when you're thinking about pharmaceutical development. So it's all about pathologizing. But I think there's actually something to be said about chemical technologies that allow you to regulate mental states and key behaviors that are the true foundations of health and even longevity. When you think about what are the main longevity strategies, it's caloric restriction, it's sleep. It's all about changing your lifestyle, and that can be easier said than done. And I think there are certain people that would benefit from chemical inputs that help them establish that new rhythm. And that can include a wide variety of drug classes. And we've had the opportunity to start digging into some of that R&D last year, but we're excited about how limitless our opportunities will be now that we can leverage virtual screening tech.
Wow. So you were, would it be fair to call you a biz dev person at Google? That's where you came from?
Strategy.
Okay. So not
corporate strategy.
Corporate strategy. Okay. I mean, not what I expected you to say, I guess is where I'm coming from. Because this feels like a big shift. It feels like this is like a life mission thing, and you sort of got more and more interested in it. Would you say that's true?
It's a life mission thing, and it's also I first gained interest in crypto in 2011. I've been interested in Bittensor for 4 years, so it's kind of threading different moments of my life and culminating in this specific project. So it's very exciting. It's very exciting to see it grow and to see how warmly it's been received by the community just a little over a week after launch.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, I mean, but 2011, oh my God, I'm actually super impressed because the class of 2011 is a special class. I'm class of 2013. So I and most people are like, oh my God, you're an OG. And I'm like, well, there are people who are even older than I, and those 2 years were a big 2 years, right? If you knew about it in 2011 and you acted, that was incredibly powerful, and you got incredibly orders of magnitude larger returns than I would have gotten from sort of 2013 on. So, all right, let's hear from Pedro. So, how did you?
The last thing I would say is even just not just the returns, but I think what's interesting is as an early believer to see I'm excited to contribute a new use case or help justify how this is actually really interesting, helpful technology, and that it's not just a scam.
Thank you for that. Yes, thank you. I think that's I feel the same way about it you do. I feel like this is a very important thing, crypto. And I feel like there are too many voices who sort of shout it down and try to shove it in the shadows, and that's not what this is. This is as important as the internet or the PC revolution. It's that class of thing, and so it kind of it hurts my heart when people attack it, right? I'm sure you probably feel the same way. So happy to hear that. So Pedro, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you came to be part of this?
Yeah, so I'm newer to the crypto world in it, but my background is pretty much in the scientific part, specifically focusing on integrating computational techniques in the search of new molecules that could become medicines. So in the academic realm and also in the entrepreneur realm, but never with this level of interaction with crypto that now we have here. That I really think can make like the whole difference in terms of how crazy this industry can be, considering how money flows and how hard it is to develop things. So we need to have like a lot of focus. You need to be able to access the capital, but you also need to be able to be accessing people that do understand the kind of impact that this can have in the world. It, for me, seems really like the perfect match for the amount of wealth that crypto can generate and the amount of opportunities that crypto generates for things that are high tech like that.
Yeah.
Right. And what's nice about Bittensor is like we're not just solving for funding, right? We're also solving for the actual knowledge production and like rewarding it.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I still love what you said about, things are being tried now that could not be tried any other way. And that's usually where the big breakthroughs happen, right? So the fact that this kind of research was not being funded is really bad, which is sort of like a big, giant blind spot in our science. Almost like a SOFON, right? Like from a three-body problem, right? Where it just sort of blocked, this lack of funding was blocking us from possibly having a massive breakthrough in health or longevity or, disease control or something like that. So I love the fact that this is now happening. So, I can tell you sort of really briefly, my crypto story was, you guys heard of Jason Calacanis? You know who that is? No, ringing a bell. No, do you know the All In Pod? You do. Okay.
Yes.
So he's one of the guys on the All In Pod. He's the loudmouth sort of moderator guy, right? So, anyway, he used to do a show. He and I were business partners back in like 2011 or so, and we were doing a podcast company together called This Week In, and he ran a podcast called This Week in Startups, where he had like all kinds of crazy founders on there. Most of them kind of went nowhere. Some of them turned out to be Travis Kalanick, who founded Uber, and then we had some like crazy wild-eyed guy on. That was talking about something called Bitcoin. And I remember the show because I used to listen to all the shows from my office. And I remember this guy talking about this thing going, and I remember Jason, his reaction was, "This is the most dangerous idea I've ever heard of in my life." And it was, which was an unusual reaction for him. Right. So, and so it stuck in my mind. And the guy was talking about like, magic internet money, digital money. And during the 90s, which is sort of where I, first got involved in startups, we had several of these companies trying to do digital currencies, and they all flopped. We even had Whoopi Goldberg doing commercials for one of them called Flues. So, you would think if this was a good idea, like one of those would have taken off. So I heard this, and I was like, nah, I've heard this idea before. It's bullshit. It's not going to go anywhere. Nobody wants this stuff. And I did not get the decentralized nature of it. I didn't dig into it. So I sort of dismissed it, and that was an expensive mistake, right? So 2 years later, in 2013, I had two friends of mine who were very sort of different types of human. Both got extremely excited about it, and both these guys were really successful. So I was like, I better have another look at this. And then I sort of read the white paper with my, put my engineer hat on and sort of had a harder look at it and had that like, oh my God, like moment, like, that we all have at some point. And then I was like, that'll break. I'll just poke it. Oh no, that won't work. What about? It looks like you can break it, right? Like it's so brilliantly designed, almost like a Beatles song, right? It's like where it's three chords, but somehow it's the Beatles. It's not just three chords. So Bitcoin has sort of a design like that, where you think you're going to be able to break it by poking it here or there, and you realize that wherever you poke, it doesn't matter. It's still resilient. And then you come away going, holy shit, this thing is monstrous, right? So anyway, so that was sort of my story of encountering all this stuff for the very first time. Okay, so let's talk now about subnets in general. So you guys have experienced the dTAO launch as a subnet. Like I've viewed it as a participant, and I've noticed some things. Like for example, it appears that the emissions go into the emissions basically dilute the subnet tokens 2.5% every day. So in order to sort of tread water as someone purchasing subnet tokens, I'm betting that the market cap of that subnet is going to grow 75% per month at the moment. Now I know those numbers are moving around, but that's what I've observed, right? So, and I think that's probably a decent bet in most cases because the subnet market caps are really low, right? Like you guys are 1.3 million. So, I mean, holy shit, most valuations for startups are like 30, 40 million, right? Like if you're angel investing, that's like the lowest you get. That's, in a lot of cases, some of them are even like 100 million, right? So 1.3 million is insanely cheap. So betting that's going to grow 75%, a month, pretty good bet, right? So anyway, so that's my experience. Why don't you guys tell me about your experience with dTAO and sort of this whole madness that we've seen over the last like 2 weeks or so?
Well, I think we launched at the right time in that dTAO at least had been live for like 2 weeks. So we were able to see it actually happen and not launch straight into that space. But also I think the way that it is designed, like there are like advantages to being a part of it early. And so I'm feeling pretty good about when we were able to actually get up and running. And it's true. It's like in being a part of like a native token that has such a small market cap, like you can be a part of this like meteoric rise, right? It's like, it kind of blends the appeal of like catching a meme coin the moment it's like launched some pump fund, but with like certain design principles that like reduce like the volatility of that speculation, right? I think just the emission schedule alone affords a little bit more security to like retail investors.
Okay, Pedro, what are your thoughts on this world?
Yeah, I think that if we compare dTAO with other crypto platforms in which you can like very easily launch anything, and in which you have like many more how can I put that, direction really in terms of tokenomics. We can see that this level of structure is very much appreciated, like by me and I think by a lot of others, because when we're talking about what is being built in every subnet in Bittensor, we're talking about usually things that are being built for the long term, and so you need to have some kind of direction in which you at least can have a feeling that things are going on the right path in terms of sustaining the growth in the medium and long term also. So I'm pretty excited, and my feeling is that there wouldn't be a better platform for us to be doing that. I don't think there is actually.
Yeah,
I agree.
No, I would agree with you. I've seen some people attempt to do sort of, Bittensor clones, and I've seen like maybe 3 or 4 of these that look maybe decent, but nobody's even come close to sort of the I don't know, the success, the enthusiasm, the network effects that Bittensor has been able to engender, right? It feels like the serious play. There was a moment where you guys probably saw virtuals pop up, right? Did you know what I'm talking about? Okay. So like virtuals, and then the other one was Eliza OS. So there were sort of these two, not really competing because they didn't really compete, but like they basically were meme coins with mouths, right? So they had, a meme coin with a Twitter account that could talk, right? Then an AI powered the Twitter account. So what I liked about that was that the masses could see and experience the AI, right? It was very sort of tangible to everyone, and it looked magical, right? You have like robots talking on Twitter, right? Like a lot of people had never seen that before, right? Or didn't understand they were seeing it, right? So they're like, oh my God, I can talk to the robot and I can invest in it. That's awesome. So the market cap of, right. And then virtuals did a very good job of the UI where, you had something that looked like coin market cap, and then you clicked on each of the coins and you went into an interface that, had a link to go talk to that particular bot. And then you could buy it right there in the interface, right? And this is before dTAO. So, Bittensor didn't have any of this stuff yet. It was like a DOS prompt compared to like a windowing interface, right? It was that sort of, jump. And so when dTAO launched, all of a sudden there was a front door, right? And you could see these things. But my fear was that things like what you're doing and protein folding were too esoteric for the people that were betting on sort of the meme coins with mouths, right? There's no way to really directly experience and feel in your gut what's going on inside of your subnet, right? You know what I'm saying? Like in the same way. So I was a little worried about that. And it seems to me now that maybe that worry was misplaced. Virtuals went up to like a $5 billion market cap and surpassed TAO, which we'd never seen that happen with Bitcoin. So that made me go, is there a new dynamic here? You know, is the stupid shit going to win? Basically, is what I was sort of afraid of, right? And,
yeah.
Did you guys watch all that? Did you have the same reaction to it?
I did. And I think actually, I mean, a lot of things come to mind. One of them is Bittensor is really complicated. It's maybe the most complicated network. And so if you actually manage to break through, there's like security in that. You know, and I think ELISA and like some of these other platforms that have like really like lowered the barrier of entry are great, but at the same time they're more susceptible to like falling because there isn't enough of a moat in like adopting them. I think agent frameworks of all kinds are super promising, and I just think Bittensor is like way more open-ended and flexible, and it allows for different directions of growth. So it has the strength of an incumbent that I don't think some of these other platforms have had. I think they were really great in showing and demonstrating the use case. But I think they were almost too easy to use. And so they kind of like rise and fell like really quickly.
They did.
That doesn't mean that they're not going to like pick back up. I just think that Bittensor really forces you to become an expert on a lot of things. And it's constantly mutating. And that's why you're seeing people building all different kinds of things and then sticking over time, because the problem is really hard to break into.
Yeah, I saw like, and people are building other user interfaces on top of it, right? So I'm like you probably, I'm guessing, I'm using TAOstats.io as sort of my primary user interface to look at all the subnet tokens, to look at the general trends. But it's sort of hard to, it's a really well done thing. I have to like, first of all, give the people behind it credit. It's an extremely complex back end, and the front end, you know, looks like a space shuttle cockpit, but everything is there and everything works. And that's kind of amazing, right? Like they actually got it right on the first try out of the box. That said, it's, there are better user interfaces that could probably be made for, you know, what we now see as the Bittensor backend. And I've seen one pop up that looks a lot better, although it's a lot more primitive and lacks a lot of features, called Sword Scan. And Sword Scan is now, it's sort of like the cookie of the Bittensor universe. So it shows things like, you know, sentiment, right? It shows, you know, how popular certain subnets are on Twitter. What's the mind share, right? That's sort of where they're partially focused on. But also the user interface, like it also shows like how many whales have each subnet coin, you know, versus the dolphins and the minnows and all that stuff, right? So I kind of like that. It's sort of dopey AOL simple, but that's where I live. So there you go.
No, I think that's great, and I think we need more of it. I use SwordScan. I use all of these different front ends. I also think that is the future, is to develop more of these tools that like allow people to like interact. But I also think it's harder to like retroactively build out the back end. I think it's easier to build the front layers that like people will be interacting with, and all of a sudden like have this really simple user interface and then add complexity in the back. But that's my high level opinion on it. And I think we will see more and more people come out with products that increase like Bittensor's overall user base and that make it more and more simple for them to be buying these dTAO tokens.
Yeah, I agree. Pedro, any thoughts on this? Have you played around enough have you played around with TAOstats.io yourself? And are you looking at other subnets?
Yeah. Actually, I think with like the two that were cited, others, because it is always very interesting to be, seeing the different kind of information that is being presented in the different products being served out there. They're pretty much complementary, in my opinion. But for sure, I think like this is a huge leap that is absolutely necessary in the detail world, because it is super important to have this like foundation really well done in terms of very robust science and technology, but also this need to reach everyone else. So otherwise, you won't be able to like have the virtual cycle. So
Yeah.
I think this is really, really the way to have like many of those front ends that bring you different kinds of information. Some of them might be better for like subnet owners. Some of them might be better for miners. Some of them might be better for like investors. So yeah, I think this is actually pretty important for the hard tech to be also developed.
Are there any
We
favorite subnets?
ourselves, I was just going to say, we ourselves are actually facing this problem right now. We're currently building a dashboard so that we can make our information more accessible to everyone else as well. So stay tuned. We'll be launching that soon.
That's awesome. That's because I, as someone who invests in subnets, like the more info I can find out about what each of these subnets are doing and just, understand it. So I guess that's one part marketing, but not hype marketing because I'm sort of, everybody's sick of that. But just explain better what you're doing and how it's going. And, I love the fact that you're doing a dashboard where we can sort of, hopefully see the metrics inside, of almost like your company dashboard, the extent that you can share that information. Super useful. And I think people will respond very well to that. So congratulations. I haven't heard of anyone else doing this. Could be wrong. There could be other things out there I haven't seen yet, but you're the first one to say that, to my knowledge. Are you guys looking at other subnets? Like, in other words, do you have any favorites that you are investing in that you are willing to share?
I mean, I feel like we haven't given every subnet a chance to like choose a favorite, but we are very grateful for the support that we've gotten from a couple other subnet owners. So, I mean, I'll do a shout out for Templar and I'll do a shout out for Celium. They've both been supportive in our growth, but at the same time, and Macrocosmos, they've also been really great. We've gotten the chance to like interact with the people that we've gone to thus far, but I look forward to interacting with other people in the future as well.
Yes. Macrocosmos was just my last guest, so I had both of those guys on. So they're great.
Yeah, they're
so
wonderful.
I noticed that. Yes. So I noticed that Const, which I think I'm not really sure what that stands for. I think it's Constellation, who is sort of the main founder of Bittensor. He's been tweeting about you guys a lot. Have you guys talked with him directly? Do you know him, or has he just sort of noticed you?
Yeah, we know him, and he's also been like incredibly supportful in this process. I'm curious, what was kind of the selling point? What made you actually buy our token, and what are the things that you think you will be looking at in terms of deciding whether or not to hold or even invest further?
Const plugging it made my ears prick up. That was the first sort of clue, and because he's clearly interested in seeing very useful AI things, on the Bittensor network. So when people ask him, like, "Well, what is this good for?" He's not just pointing at meme coins with mouths, right? Which he wants to point at serious people doing serious things, and he seemed very excited about you guys. So that was sort of the first sort of clue that there was something pretty interesting going on here. I went with the Macrocosmos guys. I sort of, I confess, I sort of ripped on protein folding as sort of my example of, something nobody understands and nobody will ever invest in that subnet. And it turns out I was totally wrong because actually the subnet's doing quite well now. But I thought it was maybe too esoteric. And I quickly started realizing maybe that that might be an example of the best use case, not like sort of a bottom rung one, but more of a top rung one. So I started thinking more like that as I was encountering you guys. So and then frankly there was a lot of heat around you guys, and there seemed to be a lot of validation around other brains sort of looking at you thinking the same thing. Your mind share went up quite a bit at one point over on SwordScan. So without having, that's about the best anyone can tell about what you're doing, other than speaking with you, right? So that was that. It was a little bit of a guess, but that was sort of what interested me. Okay, is there anything you guys would like to plug? Where can we find more information about you, your subnet? What are some URLs and Twitter handles? What do you got?
You can find us on Twitter. We're metanova_labs, or you can find us on website, metanova-labs.com. And we would love to stay involved with the community and really appreciate you making the time to give us more exposure. I think everybody that's been helping to spread the word makes a huge contribution in our work, and we're working hard to like retribute that value over time.
Thank you. Anything to add, Pedro?
No, thank you. Thank you a lot, Mark, for inviting us. I think spaces like that in which you can really present what we're doing for like a broader audience are super, super important. And yeah.
Well, thank you both so very much for coming on such short notice. I personally really appreciate that, and I love what you're doing. I'll say it again, just the idea that like there's now a new class of bio company that will explore things that would have remained unexplored, right? It's sort of like, nobody's going out and exploring these new continents that we know are probably there. And now the little ships are going out and having a look and seeing what those new continents look like. That's awesome, and I'm a big fan of you guys and what you're doing. So I'm very happy to be a Subnet investor. But that's all the time we have, kids. My name is Mark Jeffrey.
Thank you
This has been
so
Hatch
much.
Rate. We'll see you all next time.